The night sky erupted into an unnatural glow as flames licked the horizon, drawing Parker Xanders from his sleep with an urgency that sent him tumbling from his bedroll. The 28-year-old cowboy had been drifting through Colorado territory for 3 weeks, finding odd jobs at ranches and sleeping under stars that now disappeared behind the billowing smoke of what could only be a substantial fire. Parker didn't hesitate. He yanked on his boots, grabbed his hat, and mounted his horse, Biscuit, in one fluid motion born from years in the saddle. The gelding seemed to sense the emergency, galloping through the darkness toward the orange glow that grew more intense with each passing moment. It was 1876, and the West was still wild, lawless in parts, dangerous in most. A man traveling alone had to keep his wits about him, and Parker had plenty. 6 feet tall, with shoulders broadened by years of ranch work, he could handle himself in most situations, but fire was different. Fire showed no mercy, made no distinctions. As he crested the hill, Parker saw it, a barn engulfed in flames. The structure stood a quarter mile from a modest farmhouse, mercifully untouched by the blaze thus far. No one seemed to be fighting the fire, no bucket line, no desperate farmers. The place looked abandoned, except a scream pierced the night air. Parker urged Biscuit closer, dismounting 50 yards from the inferno. Heat slapped his face like an open palm as he approached, eyes squinting against the brightness. Another scream, definitely human, definitely female, came from inside the burning structure. "Hello," he shouted. "Anyone in there? Help me, I'm locked in." The voice was high with panic, but unmistakably adult. Without thinking, Parker pulled his bandana over his nose and mouth and ran toward the barn door. A heavy wooden beam had fallen against it, barring exit from the inside. Through gaps in the wood, he could see movement, someone trapped in the hellish orange glow. "Stand back from the door." He called, throwing his weight against the beam. It didn't budge. Smoke billowed around him, filling his lungs despite the bandana. The heat was unbearable, his skin already feeling tight and burned. He spotted an axe leaning against the side of the barn, providentially spared from the flames thus far. Grabbing it, Parker swung with all his might at the door, splintering wood with each powerful blow. 3 strikes in, he'd created an opening large enough to reach through. 4 more, and he could squeeze his shoulders through the gap. Inside was pure chaos. Flames crawled up the walls and across the hayloft. The air was nearly unbreathable. Through the smoke, he saw her, a woman with dark hair, pressed against the far wall, coughing violently. "Come on." Parker shouted, extending his hand. "We have to go now." She stumbled toward him, falling once before reaching his outstretched arm. Her fingers gripped his with surprising strength as he pulled her toward the opening he'd created. "Can you fit through?" he asked, helping her toward the splintered door. She nodded, choking on smoke. Parker guided her through the opening first, then followed quickly as a support beam crashed down where they'd just been standing. Outside, the air felt gloriously cool despite the nearby flames. The woman collapsed to her knees, gulping fresh air. Parker didn't give her time to recover. He scooped her into his arms and carried her away from the burning building, not stopping until they were well clear of danger. The eastern horizon was just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn as he set her down gently on the grass. Her face, smudged with soot, was illuminated by the combination of fire and breaking day. Despite the dirt and ash, Parker could see she was beautiful, perhaps 25, with striking features and intelligent eyes now red from smoke. "Thank you," she managed between coughs. "I thought I was going to die in there. What happened?" Parker asked, removing his bandana to wipe his own sweaty, sooty face. "How'd you get locked in?" The woman's eyes hardened. "Someone put me there, deliberately." Parker felt a chill despite the heat of the nearby fire. Who would do such a thing? "My name is Lilah James," she said, pushing herself to a sitting position. "And I believe my cousin tried to murder me tonight." Parker frowned. "Your cousin? Why?" 5,000 acres of prime ranching land, Lilah said bitterly. "My father's property. He died last month and I'm his only heir." "Cousin Victor doesn't think a woman should own such a valuable property. He's been trying to convince me to sell to him at a fraction of its worth." The barn roof collapsed with a tremendous crash, sending sparks shooting skyward. Lilah flinched at the sound. We should get farther away, Parker said, helping her to her feet. Can you walk? She nodded, though she leaned heavily against him. My horse is behind the house. If Victor comes back to check his handiwork, I don't want to be here. Parker whistled for Biscuit, who trotted over obediently. I'm Parker Xanders, he said, realizing he hadn't introduced himself. Was heading to Denver looking for work when I saw the fire. Providence sent you, Lilah said, her voice stronger now. I've been managing the ranch since Father fell ill last year. There's work if you want it, Mr. Xanders. And I could use someone trustworthy around. Parker hesitated. He'd never been one to stay in one place too long, but something about this woman's determination touched him, and if someone was indeed trying to kill her, she shouldn't be alone. Let's get you somewhere safe first, he said. Then we can talk about work. They retrieved Lilah's horse, a spirited mare named Juniper, from behind the house. As they rode away from the property, the burning barn collapsed entirely behind them. Dawn was breaking fully now, painting the landscape in soft gold light that contrasted starkly with the smoke and destruction they left behind. My nearest neighbor is Abel Thompson, Lilah said as they rode. About 3 miles east. He's a good man, fought with my father in the war. We can trust him. Parker nodded, keeping Biscuit close to Juniper. He studied Lilah as they rode her straight back, the determined set of her jaw. She'd nearly died, yet here she was, planning her next move. There was something admirable about that. The Thompson place was a modest but well-kept ranch house with a large barn and several corrals. As they approached, a man with a silver-streaked beard emerged onto the porch, shotgun in hand. Who goes there? He called. It's Lilah James. Abel, she called back. I'm in trouble. The man lowered his weapon immediately. Lilah, good Lord, child, what's happened to you? They dismounted, and Lilah quickly explained the night's events. Abel's weathered face grew increasingly grim as she spoke. Victor James is a snake, he spat when she finished. Always has been. Your father knew it too, which is why he left everything to you. He turned to Parker, eyeing him suspiciously. And who might you be? Parker Xanders, just passing through when I saw the fire. He saved my life, Abel, Lilah added. Broke into the barn and carried me out. Abel's expression softened somewhat. Then you have my thanks, Mr. Xanders. Come inside, both of you. Martha will fix you something to eat while we figure out what to do. Martha Thompson was a kind-faced woman who exclaimed in horror at Lilah's soot-stained appearance. She ushered the young woman away to clean up, while Abel showed Parker where he could wash the grime from his face and hands. Lilah's father was one of the finest men I ever knew, Abel said as Parker scrubbed at his blackened skin. William James built that ranch from nothing. Fought off rustlers, survived drought and blizzards. For his own flesh and blood to try to steal it from his daughter, it's unconscionable. You believe her story, then? Parker asked. About her cousin, Abel nodded grimly. Victor James has been coveting that land for years. He's deep in debt to some unsavory characters in Denver. Getting his hands on the James ranch would solve all his problems. When they gathered at the kitchen table, Lilah had changed into borrowed clothes, her hair damp from washing. Without the soot and panic, she was even more striking, clear-eyed and composed, with a quiet dignity that impressed Parker. We need to go to the sheriff, Abel said, pouring coffee. Lilah shook her head. Sheriff Dawson and Victor play cards every Saturday night. They're thick as thieves. Then we'll go to the federal marshal in Denver, Martha suggested. That's 4 days' ride, Lilah countered, and I won't be driven from my own property. Victor thinks he's eliminated me. Let's use that to our advantage. Parker raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? I'll stay here with the Thompsons, supposedly recovering from my ordeal, Lilah said, her mind clearly working quickly. Meanwhile, you return to my ranch as a drifter looking for work. Victor will likely come around to survey the damage and confirm my death. You can be my eyes and ears. Parker set down his coffee cup. That's dangerous. If he suspects anything, he won't, Lilah insisted. He's arrogant, not clever. Just tell him you're passing through, saw the burned barn, and wondered if there might be work rebuilding it. Abel and Martha exchanged concerned glances. Lilah, this is risky, Abel cautioned. So is doing nothing while my cousin tries to steal my birthright, she replied firmly. I won't let him take what my father built. Parker studied her, admiring her courage even as he questioned her plan. And what exactly would I be looking for? Evidence, Lilah said. Something concrete connecting Victor to the fire. Then we can go to the territorial judge in Central City. Judge Hammond is honest and won't be swayed by local connections. Parker ran a hand through his hair, considering. He'd planned to be in Denver by week's end, maybe find work with one of the cattle companies. Getting involved in a land dispute with potential murder attached wasn't in his plans, but looking at Lilah's determined face, something shifted inside him. He'd been drifting for years, never staying anywhere long enough to form attachments. Perhaps it was time to stand for something. All right, he said finally, I'll do it, but we need signals, ways to communicate safely. They spent the morning devising a plan. Parker would pose as a drifting ranch hand seeking work. Abel would ride to Central City to inform Judge Hammond of their suspicions, laying groundwork in case they found evidence. Lilah would remain hidden at the Thompson place, recovering and planning their next moves. By midday, Parker was riding back toward the James ranch, his mind filled with details about the property and Victor's habits that Lilah had shared. The burned barn came into view first, now just a blackened skeleton against the blue Colorado sky. Beyond it stood the main house, a solidly built two-story structure that spoke of prosperity earned through hard work. As Parker approached, he noticed a man on horseback near the ruins of the barn. Even from a distance, Parker could tell this wasn't a ranch hand. The horse was too fine, the clothes too clean. This would be Victor James coming to confirm his handiwork. Parker straightened in his saddle, adopting the casual posture of a man with nowhere particular to be. He tipped his hat as he rode up. Afternoon, he called. Looks like you had some trouble here. The man turned, startled. He was perhaps 40, with a carefully trimmed mustache and expensive clothes that seemed out of place on a ranch. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. Who are you? He demanded. Name's Parker Xanders, Parker replied easily. Was passing through, saw the burned building, wondered if you might need an extra hand to rebuild. Victor James studied him carefully. You're looking for work? Yes, sir. Been working ranches from Texas to Wyoming. Good with cattle, better with horses, and I can swing a hammer with the best of them. Victor seemed to relax slightly. Well, Mr. Xanders, this property has indeed suffered a tragedy. Not just the barn, the owner, my cousin, perished in the fire last night. Parker feigned surprise and dismay. That's terrible. My condolences. Thank you, Victor said, not looking particularly bereaved. As her closest relative, I'll be taking over operations here, and yes, I suppose I could use help rebuilding. The hands will be back from the north pasture tomorrow. They don't yet know about Miss James's unfortunate accident. The casual way he referred to Lilah's supposed death made Parker's blood boil, but he kept his expression neutral. Sorry for your loss. If you're hiring, I'm available. Been on the trail a while, wouldn't mind staying put for a spell. Victor nodded thoughtfully. Very well. Bunkhouse is behind the main house, $1 a day plus meals. We'll start clearing the barn remains tomorrow. Much obliged, Parker said, touching the brim of his hat. As he rode toward the bunkhouse, Parker could feel Victor's eyes on his back. The man was suspicious by nature, it seemed. Parker would need to tread carefully. The bunkhouse was empty, the ranch hands apparently still working the north pasture as Victor had mentioned. Parker chose a bunk, stowed his meager belongings, and took stock of his surroundings. The place was clean and well-maintained. Lilah ran a tight operation. Throughout the afternoon, Parker made himself useful, chopping wood and repairing a broken corral gate. All the while, he observed Victor, who spent most of his time in the main house, emerging occasionally to survey the property with a proprietary air that set Parker's teeth on edge. As evening approached, Victor called Parker to the house. You'll take your meals in the kitchen, he said. Mrs. Finch is the cook. She's distraught about my cousin's passing, so don't mind her if she seems out of sorts. Parker found Mrs. Finch to be a round, motherly woman with red-rimmed eyes. She served him a plate of stew without speaking, then sat heavily in a chair across from him. You're new, she said finally. Yes, madam, just hired on today. She nodded absently, dabbing at her eyes with her apron. It's a terrible thing. Miss Lilah was the heart of this place. Her father would be devastated. Parker felt a pang of guilt for not telling the woman that Lilah was alive, but he knew better than to trust anyone yet. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said instead. "It wasn't no accident," Mrs. Finch whispered, leaning forward. "That barn door was never locked. Never. And Miss Lilah wouldn't have been out there at night unless someone called her out." Parker tried to look merely sympathetic rather than keenly interested. "That's so, Mr. Victor. He was here yesterday afternoon. I heard them arguing. He wanted her to sell, said she couldn't manage a spread this size on her own." Mrs. Finch shook her head. "Miss Lilah told him she'd see him in hell before she'd sell her father's legacy. Then this morning, Mr. Victor rides in saying there was a fire and Miss Lilah's gone." Parker took a thoughtful bite of stew. "Seems mighty convenient for him." Mrs. Finch's eyes widened. "You watch yourself, young man. These walls have ears." Parker nodded, understanding her warning. "Food's excellent, madam, thank you." That night, lying in his bunk, Parker pieced together what he knew. Victor had argued with Lilah the day before the fire. He'd shown up immediately after to claim the property. And according to Mrs. Finch, the barn door was never normally locked, supporting Lilah's claim that she'd been deliberately trapped inside. It was circumstantial, but damning. Still, they needed more to convince a judge. The next morning, the ranch hands returned from the north pasture. Victor gathered them in front of the house to announce Lilah's death. Parker watched their reactions, carefully, genuine shock and grief from most, though a few exchanged glances that suggested skepticism. One older hand, introduced as Hank, approached Parker afterward. "You're new," he said bluntly. "Hired on yesterday," Parker confirmed. Hank studied him thoughtfully. "Convenient timing. Just happened to ride up looking for work the day after the boss lady supposedly dies in a fire." Parker maintained a neutral expression. "Just following the work, friend." "Uh-huh," Hank said, unconvinced. "Well, word of advice, Mr. Victor ain't well liked around here. Miss Lilah's been running this place fine without him for over a year. Anybody says different is selling something." Over the next 3 days, Parker worked alongside the ranch hands, clearing the burned barn debris. He kept his ears open and his opinions to himself, noting which hands seemed loyal to Lilah and which deferred to Victor. He also observed Victor's increasingly proprietary behavior, changing procedures, talking about selling off part of the herd, making plans as if the ranch were already legally his. On the 4th night, Parker slipped away from the bunkhouse after dark. He'd arranged to meet Lilah at a predetermined location. A lightning-struck pine 2 miles from the main house. He found her already waiting, sitting astride juniper in the moonlight. "You're all right?" she asked immediately. "Fine," Parker assured her. "Your cousin believes you're dead. He's already making changes at the ranch." Lilah's jaw tightened. "The nerve of him. Have you found anything useful?" "Mrs. Finch confirms you argued with Victor the day before the fire. She also says the barn door was never locked, supporting your story that someone trapped you in there." "That's still not enough," Lilah sighed. "We need something concrete." "I think I know where to look," Parker said. "Victor spends a lot of time in your father's study. He's looking for something, probably the deed or will. If he planned this murder attempt, there might be evidence there." Lilah nodded. "The safe is behind my father's portrait. The combination is my birthday, April 16, 1851. Parker raised an eyebrow. "You trust me with that information?" A small smile crossed her face. "You pulled me from a burning building, Mr. Xanders. I think I can trust you with my safe combination." Something warm unfurled in Parker's chest at her words. "I'll check it tomorrow. Victor's riding to town for supplies." "Be careful," Lilah said, her expression serious again. "Abel returned from Central City yesterday. Judge Hammond is concerned but needs evidence before he can act." "I'll find it," Parker promised. As they prepared to part ways, Lilah reached out suddenly, placing her hand on his arm. "Parker, thank you. Not many men would risk themselves for a stranger's fight." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and Parker felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, or a possibility. "Maybe you're not a stranger anymore," he said softly. Her smile lingered in his mind long after they'd gone their separate ways. The next day, as promised, Victor rode to town with 2 hands. Parker waited until Mrs. Finch was busy in the garden, then slipped into the main house and found William James's study, a handsome room lined with books, and dominated by a large desk. The portrait of William James hung behind the desk, a stern-faced man with Lilah's same determined eyes. Parker carefully removed it from the wall, revealing the safe. Using the combination Lilah had provided, he opened it easily. Inside were several documents, the deed to the ranch, Williams will clearly naming Lilah as his sole heir, and a stack of letters. Parker quickly examined the will, confirming it was properly signed and witnessed. As he replaced it, he noticed something odd about one of the letters. It was addressed to Victor James, but had been opened and replaced in the safe. Parker unfolded it and found himself looking at a letter from a Denver bank, demanding payment on a loan of $5,000, a fortune in 1876. The letter threatened legal action if payment wasn't received by month's end. It was dated just 2 weeks before the fire. This was motive. Victor needed money desperately, and Lilah's inheritance stood in his way. As Parker carefully replaced the documents and closed the safe, he heard the study door open behind him. He turned to find Victor standing in the doorway, a pistol aimed at his chest. "I thought there was something odd about you, Xanders," Victor said coldly. "No drifter takes such an interest in ranch business. Who are you really, and what are you doing in my brother-in-law's study?" Parker raised his hands slowly. "Just curious about the man who built this place." Behind his portrait, "Try again." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Wait." "How did you open the safe?" Parker remained silent, mind racing for a way out of this situation. Victor's expression changed as realization dawned. "You know the combination, which means—" His face paled. "Lilah's alive, isn't she? You pulled her out of that barn." "I don't know what you're talking about," Parker said evenly. "Don't lie to me." Victor's hand trembled slightly, making the gun waver. "Where is she?" "Put the gun down, Victor," came a voice from the doorway. Both men turned to see Lilah standing there, rifle in hand, aimed steadily at her cousin. Behind her stood Hank and 2 other ranch hands, all armed. "Lilah," Victor gasped. "How, you're not very good at murder, cousin," she said coldly. "Fortunately for me." Victor's face contorted with rage. "This is my ranch now. Your father always meant for me to have it." "That's not what his will says," Parker interjected. "And that's not what the bank threatening to seize your assets says either." Victor lunged suddenly toward Parker, but Hank was faster. The old ranch hand tackled Victor to the ground, disarming him as the other hands rushed forward to help. "Tie him up," Lilah ordered. "Sheriff Dawson may be his friend, but even he can't ignore attempted murder." As the hands led Victor away, Lilah approached Parker. "I was worried when you didn't return last night. Hank found me this morning. Apparently, he recognized Biscuit at our meeting place. He's been loyal to my family for 20 years. "Smart man," Parker said, relieved that their plan hadn't been completely compromised. "I couldn't wait any longer," Lilah continued. "When we saw Victor return early and head straight for the house, we knew something was wrong." Parker handed her the bank letter. "This proves motive, combined with Mrs. Finch's testimony about your argument and the locked barn door." "It should be enough for Judge Hammond," Lilah agreed. She looked up at Parker, her eyes soft. "You've risked a lot for me, Mr. Xanders." "Parker," he corrected gently, "and it was worth the risk." 2 weeks later, Victor James was in custody awaiting trial for attempted murder. Judge Hammond had reviewed the evidence and found it compelling enough to hold Victor without bail. The James Ranch was securely back in Lilah's hands, with the ranch hands more loyal than ever after the ordeal. Parker had delayed his journey to Denver, staying on to help rebuild the barn. Each day brought him and Lilah closer together as they worked side by side to restore her property and plan its future. On a warm evening in late summer, they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the Colorado mountains in brilliant gold and crimson. The new barn stood finished behind them, a testament to hard work and new beginnings. "The cattle buyer from Denver offered a fair price," Lilah said, sipping her coffee. "With that money, we can expand the operation next spring." Parker noted her use of "we," but didn't comment on it. "Your father would be proud of how you've handled everything," she smiled, turning to face him. "I've been thinking about what happens next. The ranch is secure, Victor will face justice, and you were heading to Denver when all this started." Parker studied her face in the fading light. "I was." "And now," she asked softly, Now I'm thinking maybe I've been drifting long enough, he replied. Found something worth staying for. Lilah set down her coffee cup and moved closer to him on the porch swing. I never properly thanked you for saving my life that night. You don't need to thank me, Parker began, but she pressed a finger to his lips. I was terrified, certain I was going to die, she continued. And then there you were, breaking through that door like some hero from a penny novel. You carried me into the dawn, Parker. You gave me back my future. Their eyes met, and Parker felt that same recognition he'd experienced that night by the lightning-struck pine, only stronger now, more certain. I think, he said slowly, that you might have given me a future too. When he kissed her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, as if all his years of wandering had been leading him to this woman, this place, this moment. 1 year later, they stood together on the same porch, watching a new day dawn over the James Xanders ranch. Victor had been convicted and sentenced to prison for his crimes. The ranch was flourishing under their joint management with new breeding stock and expanded grazing lands. No regrets, Lilah asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder, about settling down instead of continuing your adventures. Parker wrapped his arm around her waist, his hand resting gently on the slight swell of her belly where their first child grew. The only adventure worth having, he said, is the one we're building together. As the sun climbed higher, painting the rebuilt barn in golden light, Parker reflected on how a single moment could change everything. One decision to investigate a fire in the night, one act of courage in breaking down a door. He had carried Lilah from that burning barn into the dawn, never suspecting he was also carrying himself into a new life filled with purpose, belonging, and love.